Very welcome, everyone. My name is Magdalena Malm. I'm the director of the Public Art Agency Sweden, Statens Konstråd, for you who are Swedish. I'm very thrilled to see you all here. When we planned this seminar, I was like, but this is a very kind of detailed question of a specific kind of curating. Maybe we won't have such a turn-up, but we have actually a long waiting list, which is very exciting because I think we also have some fantastic speakers here today. The day will be structured in the way that we have short presentations followed by discussions. 3 of those. It's curating the civic, curating in a response to a local context, and curating the urban from social fabric to infrastructure. And the idea is that there will be dialogues here on stage. There will be room for a couple of questions at the end of each session. But really, as we know, it's quite hard to have in-depth conversations with almost 200 people. We have arranged the workshops in the afternoon. So in the afternoon, there will be plenty of room to talk about the issues that we bring up here. So there will be lots of time to talk about that. Make sure that you remember which workshop you picked, and we will let you know when it's time for workshops. We'll instruct you of how to find that place, so don't worry about that. Coffee and lunch and everything is here, and toilets are underneath the bicycle to the right, but also in the entrance you can find more toilets. Rickard, our filmmaker, is filming and documenting this, so other people can also see it afterwards, so just so you know. I would like to extend a very warm thank you to the Royal Institute of Art, where we are. Thank you so much for co-producing or letting us have this space and also being so extremely helpful. Also, a collaboration with Academy Valand, where some of the students from the new curatorial program of public practice are here today. Jaspis for collaborating on bringing some of the international guests here. And all the doers with hands and feet and brains to make this actually work today. Thank you so much for all the labor you put into realizing this day. Also, I would like to thank Art and Theory, who are the publisher of the book Curating Context, beyond the gallery and into other fields. Jag hittar inte markören. Var är den någonstans? Va? Ah. Here we are. This is a performance in Malmö on Möllevångstorget by Santiago Mostin. It's curated by Eddie Mucka, who's our curator for this project. And what he does is he's lived in Sweden for maybe 1.5 years, and he's learning the national anthem by heart for the first time. He doesn't know it before, and he's just also learning Swedish right as he's doing this performance.
It's called the repetition.
This is set on the square where lots of neighborhoods in Malmö meet, and the whole project was inspired by the enormous amount of refugees coming to Sweden in 2015, and reflecting on what that means in everyday life. And Santiago is then trying. He falls out of it. He doesn't remember the words. He tries again, and they continue to play and play and play. And he just makes this effort and is extremely exposed in that place. And when you're in that square, first you hear the tune and this romantic national item, and you wonder, you feel very uncomfortable about, is this like a national manifestation, nationalist manifestation? And then you hear his broken Swedish and his vulnerable, not trained voice, and you have this vulnerability of how do you actually step into another society that you don't know. And I think this is a good example of when we curate context. So the whole context gives that situation to the work. It gives the meaning to the work, that we are standing there, that it's actually not in a gallery space but exposed in the middle of that square. And I think that curating context could either be, of course, curating into a specific context, but very often it's kind of the relationship between the artwork and that context that is also not static. That's kind of a porous relationship between what the artwork is, what the situation is, who the audience is, and how they participate. And the meaning is kind of formed in that kind of relationship between those. And that also means that it isn't static. It could mean something, and then there is a political event, and because the work is in reality, that political event could actually just transform how that work is understood. For instance, there was a painting by Vanessa Baird in the government quarters in Oslo that just before this terrorist attack by Bor Breivik, where many people were killed. And her kind of surrealist houses in the air suddenly were seen as very terrible remembrance of that attack, so the painting couldn't be placed there but had to be moved. And when we work in context outside of the gallery space, we kind of always are affected in different ways by this. Also, I think there are so many considerations of what is the time of the day. If we want to capture a feeling of unreality, it might be at night time that we select to do it. Or we might want to do a choreographic or performative work where we don't want the division between the stage and the audience. So it's those kinds of practices that artists have where they don't actually fit in the gallery space. They expand that, and they don't only not fit, but they require a specific context. They require a resistance, or they require a support. Even a dialogue needs to be carefully thought out. What is the context that we need to do that dialogue? And in the book, Rack's Media Collective are part, and they have this beautiful sentence there. To curate is to offer, metaphorically speaking, not just old wine in new bottles, or even new wine in no bottles, but also all that is entailed insofar as the cultivation of a vineyard, running a distillery, maintenance of a cellar, and the administration of a tavern. All of those are concerned, and all at the same time. And I think for those of us who work specifically every time with a new project, demanding to understand what are the permissions, which kind of collaboration, what kind of production do we have to build, we know that this is a laborious process. But we have to consider all of these things, because when we make decisions about the production, it's going to affect the meaning of the work. Every single decision in the process will affect how we can understand that specific work. So it's not a random kind of, let's put something outside, but it's a very, very specific. We know, of course, all of us with institutional critique, that the white cube was built for the modernist art to exclude context. And of course, then we have since long seen artists transforming or doing other kind of practice, stepping out of the white cube in order to be in that context. We haven't maybe so much considered what it means for the curatorial practice. What does it mean if we realize that some works are perfect in a gallery space, but other works really need to find their place or stage their situation. What, as curators, do we have to know? And for me, this book and this seminar is based on my work building up mobile art production, a platform for realizing artistic and curatorial visions and finding the venue and situation that fitted each work best. And we will see other institutions working like that today. But then also stepping in to run the public art agency in Sweden. And I would say that this way of working is not, it's not about public art. I think public art is a very weird notion often of hard objects in the middle of roundabouts. And I think if we think of public art as all contemporary art that takes place in the public realm, of course this field is, this kind of skills are key to be able to produce public art. So they are they're extremely relevant if you work in that field. Although we see, of course, that biennials, museums and so on also work curating context. In the book we have Elvira Diangani also writing about the Gothenburg Biennial. We have Raimundas Malasauskas with the project Indocumenta. So I don't wish to kind of make a distinct line between inside or outside. I don't think that's meaningful, but I think that when we work outside of the gallery space, there are so many specific skills that we have to have, and those are often collected by making a lot of mistakes and understanding how to do it better next time. This is apart from my own experience working, it's a sustained conversations with a lot of the people who are talking in this seminar today, a lot of other people internationally in Sweden. When we meet, those of us who work in this way, we intensely discuss everything from how do we fund those organizations to curatorial and issues of criticality. And the attempt with the book and this seminar is actually to share this conversation with many more of you. And I would also want to mention especially the curatorial team at Statens Konstråd, where we have this ongoing dialogue about those specific issues of how to do this very, very exact kind of curating. It's very uncontrolled because you can't plan everything. You have to, suddenly something happens. The square where you've planned to have your performance, you realize there is a big brass orchestra playing next. What do you do? How do you reconsider? And it's a lot of hills and bumps, so you have to have an extremely focus, and then you have to find the ways around the bumps and hills and whatever is in between. This is also a field of a lot of collaboration. If you don't have your own space, if you always have to produce a radio program, a TV show, a performance, something which is deeply concerned with the society of the blind, whatever, you have to do new research and you have to find new collaborators all the time. So collaboration, but also conflict. We usually say that if we start a project and the conflict hasn't quite come out yet, it's just to come. We just have to understand the positions and the interests. And when we have resolved that, it's a huge potential in the conflict. A porous way of working, where the artworks are porous, they change their meaning with the context and with the people who are involved in them, with the audience. And Edward Glissant talks about relation, in which relation always embodies, allows the articulation, confrontation and orchestration of difference. And I think we are in a moment where embracing conflict is a key issue, where being able to live with it, to kind of have the multiple ways of seeing things, but still have enabling a conversation between that continues. On an institutional level, I think this kind of practice has definitely started with artists stepping out, doing things. It's been a very strong artist-led movement, and the curators and organizations that are formed are very much ear to the ground to that development. And I would say that in this practice, a very, very close dialogue with the artist is always totally foundational. traditionally, I mean, we've seen organizations like Creative Time, Art Angel, also smaller organizations like Situations, Consani, and many others running this kind of work. But we still, today, I think, need to, and there have been publications, but maybe not specifically on the curatorial aspect of what this means. Tarkovsky say, I make art for those who are receptive. And of course, that means not only the people who know about contemporary art or go to find a way to the museums or galleries, but it could be, in the cases in the book, housewives, blind people, homosexual people in Lebanon, whatever. So those could be the ones who are receptive. But what I find very fascinating with working outside of the gallery context is that you allow many different positions of the audience. The audience can be, of course, a viewer. They can be participators. They can be producers. That is, they are involved in the production of the work, of the process. They can also be protagonists, like in the hypnotic show by Raimundas Malasauskas, where everything takes place inside of your mind, and that's where the exhibition happens, and you're actually the center of the artwork. This is a quote by our colleagues, Visible, where art becomes visible as part of something else, and that relates to beyond the gallery and into other fields. The skills that are collected in these kinds of work can also be transferred into other areas of practice. We will hear about how they step into the field of law. It could be ecology. At the Public Art Agency, we work a lot with urban development. That will also be an issue today. So this kind of researching a context, listening out the issue, building collaboration, and reformulating something is a kind of methodology that works into other areas of society. And of course, that means something for the role of the artist. So we can have the traditional role of the artist is being independent, critical from the outside, in their studio, kind of not interfering or not getting involved, but being the criticality is separated from what's happening. In these practices, it's the other way around. Artists step into situations, they transform them from the inside, and that, of course, is a very different role for the artist. I think in this is, I would say, as wide a field of curating as curating in galleries or curating other exhibitions. So there are lots of different temperaments, interests, and so on. It's a wide range. But there is this interesting process that we see right now, I think, where the role of the artist is actually shifting and becoming something else. And the criticality is then not external, but it's kind of in shifting systems and transforming them. For me, thinking about what this means on a curatorial level, it's of course also really important to think about what it means on an institutional level. If we have these practices, what kind of institutions do we need? We can't have the traditional art institution. We need extremely flexible organizations where knowledge is collected over time and experiences, but also where we could always set new collaborations, step into new places, scale up the team, make it shrink, and we also have to think about how we every time build a new audience. So that's kind of all those things have to be reconsidered. And I think what we have done in the art agency is to cross-section those two. There are two lines, I think, if we talk about public art. There is the publicly funded official public art, which we all know is connected to buildings. And then there is this independent line of curatorial, where artist-led often practice, which is very situation, context specific. And at the moment we are trying to see what happens when we intersect them. How do they cross-fertilize? What happens then? And how can an agency for public art not be an administration, but actually artistically led, and in that sense transformative? I sometimes, this is, I would say, a very, very laborious way of working. It's not the easy way. It's not controllable in the same sense as producing another exhibition. It requires a constant readiness to rethink, to reconsider, to step out into any kind of situation, talk to any kind of person. A huge amount of translation of how do you express something, how do you make someone engaged and make them want to take part in that process. So why do we do it? I think it's because it's possible to always stay alive, to always learn new things. There's this desire of learning and reconsidering. And I would like to end by this quote by Marina Garces. Honesty is in some sense always violent and exercises violence. This violence is two-way, towards oneself and towards the real, since it means letting oneself be affected, and towards the real because it means entering on the scene. So if we are entering on a scene in reality, that means that we change that reality somewhat. If we do that, it means that we have to be ready to transform ourselves. And I think that is possibly the excitement of being out there, possibly transforming something or reflecting something, but also really having to reconsider ourselves continuously. Thank you.